Hello, everybody. When you think of the really sexy topics that really motivate people, that get people really animated, what do you think of? You think of the war in the Middle East. You think of issues like abortion, maybe even bread and butter issues like inflation or tax cuts. Certainly, the border. Well, we are going to delve into today the issue of all issues, the issue that gets everybody fired up. Are you ready? The New York State court system. Yes, that's right. I know the New York State, which a lot of people don't even know that this is the flag of, has one of the most bizarre and convoluted court systems in, I think, the whole country. We'll find out if that's true. And I really find that even very intelligent people, even people that pay attention to the news, even, by the way, a lot of people in the news who are news anchors, who comment on the news, they don't have an understanding of how the New York court system works. And then when something that is that has to do with the New York State court system is in the news, say the Trump trial, say the Weinstein verdict being overturned, say the drama over Governor Hochul appointing a new chief judge, they don't understand these terms. What's the Court of Appeals? What's the state Supreme Court? What's this? What's that? And this was really brought home to me when I was at a restaurant recently with a friend of mine, and then we see another friend of mine who we grew up with, who is now a New York State Supreme Court judge, and he walks away, and my friend Anthony says to me, "Hey, I know this is a stupid question, but what kind of judge is he?" And I said, "Well, he's a New York State Supreme Court justice." And my friend says to me, "What? What he is?" And what are there only 9 of them in New York, just like at the federal level? And that really brought home to me the fact that I think it's probably time for us to have a look at exactly what's going on in the court system, how it affects you, and how it can be improved. I can't think of a better person to do that with than Judge Phillip Straniere. He's a friend of mine for many years. He's also a retired supervising judge of the New York City Civil Court in Richmond County, who also served as an acting state Supreme Court justice. We'll get into the difference with some of those. And he's also the author of Filing and Winning Small Claims for Dummies. Judge Straniere, it's great to have you back. Thanks for joining me.
How are you, Frank? I'm already asleep, so and we just started.
This is the beginning of my day. So
yeah.
Hey, the most important question that I think a lot of folks are going to have is when you retire from the bench after over 20 years on the bench, do you get to keep the gavel and the robe, or do you have to give it back?
Those are all, unfortunately, in New York and locally. That's all comes out of your own pocket unless somebody gives it to you. There are other parts of the state where the bar the bar association would give a judge their robe. My first gavel was given to me by my late wife, and then I have another one someone else gave me. But you should know that in the 20 plus years on the bench, my gavel never made it out to the bench. It always stayed in the drawer in my chambers. Every once in a while, I'd have to use it to open walnuts, or if someone tried to send me a lobster and I got to use it on lobster claws. Gavels are only. I really don't know that any judge actually uses a gavel because that's it's a nice prop for TV. But if you're using the gavel, you've already lost control of the courtroom.
Got it.
You keep control of a courtroom by your demeanor, by setting the ground rules, by treating people fairly, letting them know you're going to let them speak and that you're going to listen to them, and advise them that if please don't interrupt the other side. Everybody will get a chance to talk to me. And if you treat people with respect, they treat you with respect, and you have no need for gavel.
I know your obviously specialty has been civil court throughout your career, but
Correct.
Let me ask you about a story that has been piquing a lot of people's interests around the country, and it's kind of forced a renewed interest at at the New York State court system, and that's the Trump trial. I know I had you on the radio a couple of weeks ago talking a little bit about it. Michael Cohen testifying this week. He's supposedly the star witness. How do you think the trial's going, both from a jurist perspective and as a citizen?
Well, so I will tell you that unless you're in the courtroom watching, anything else you're getting out of it is totally useless. I mean, if you listen to Fox and you listen to MSNBC, Michael Cohen's testimony and pretty much everybody's testimony was the exact opposite of whatever that. The problem with New York does not allow cameras in the courtroom. I don't know whether an application was made to waive that rule for this case, which I think in the public interest it should have been done, just because if you remember the O.J. Simpson case, you could watch that, from gavel to gavel, even though, maybe he wasn't using a gavel, but you could watch it. You could get your own impression of the witnesses, how the lawyers are doing, things like that. And the problem of getting it secondhand is of getting your view of what went on and not my view of what went on. So I can't make my own independent analysis. And even getting a transcript does not have the same flavor. And I'll tell you a story. I'm trying a case many years ago, and one of the parties happened to also be a lawyer. And he would do things during the trial, would say, "Judge, tell Mr. and it was a jury trial, tell Mr. Morano not to look at me like that." You're not looking at it like that. Or why is he using that tone of voice, Judge? So that's going into the transcript like that. And unless I would say, "Excuse me, Mr. Morano's not looking at you in any other way. He's actually looking at me. His voice isn't as properly modulated." He was trying to make appealable issues. And again, an appellate court only gets a transcript. They don't get to view a video of it and make a determination. So
I've been an advocate of cameras in the courtroom. It sounds like you've come to that view as well.
Well, my own take on it is certain cases should have it. It should be discretionary. On the other hand, I think the fear is that you're going to be there and this is your 15 minutes of fame. Right. And you're going to think that you're, on the People's Court or Judge Judy. So you're going to be acting out for the audience as opposed to following the rules of the court, making the trial more difficult. I think that's one of the arguments against it, especially with unrepresented people. But it does, the courts are very slow to change. And getting technology up to date is always a problem. But the effort has been to move in that direction. Many states allow it. So the TV judges are all TV judges. So it's a different a different flavor.
I get it. Hey, by the way, for people watching on social media, if anybody has questions about what we're talking about here, just type them in the comments, and we'll try to. Well, I won't, but Judge Straniere will try to address as many of your questions as possible as we go here, and we're going to try and touch upon as many different subjects as we can. The other criminal case that's made news and caused sort of a renewed look at the New York State court system is the Harvey Weinstein case. The New York State Court of Appeals, which we'll get into, is the highest court in New York State. They voted 4-3 to overturn his conviction on the basis of there being testimony permitted from the trial judge for uncharged crimes. Now, some lawmakers are actually talking about trying to change the law to make it so that those people could testify at Weinstein's next trial. From your, I don't know if you read the decision, but from your look at the case and your understanding of the case, did the Court of Appeals get it right?
I had when it first came down, I said, "Well, why did they do this?" And then I started going back and looking through my evidence outlines to evaluate it. Now, New York, unlike the federal system, and most states follow the federal system, does not have a separate evidence code. It has sections of the civil practice law and rules, or I guess in the criminal practice law and rules for evidence rules, but it's not a separate code. So I believe that the general rule is you can't load a courtroom up with witnesses to testify to someone's bad character, as opposed who had nothing to do with the charges in this case, because then the jury decides Frank's a bad guy. I don't whether he did this or not is irrelevant. He's a bad guy. He should be sitting in prison and getting him off the streets. So I think the case is called Molyneux, which it's always used in criminal cases, and I think it's over 100 years old. And it basically says you can't bring character witnesses in to establish someone's bad character, unconnected to this. Now, Weinstein didn't testify, right? If I recall.
Right.
So if he had testified and he said, "I never treated any woman like that," that I don't know. These are people all making it up because I'm a rich guy and they want to be in the movies and I wouldn't give a part in my movie. Then I think they can bring in character witnesses, say, "No, this is his pattern." But unless it's put into question by the defendant testifying, you're only usually supposed to limit the testimony to the actual people who brought the charges. And again, the district attorney elected not to have all those women as plaintiffs or as to testify to it. I mean, as complainants. They brought him in just as witnesses to say he's a bad guy. Right. Now, right, and so that's why they got a new. I looked over the decision, but in retrospect, probably in criminal cases, you generally err on the side of giving the person another shot at it because you're taking away people's liberty with a criminal case. So, and in light of that, you have to question why even Stormy Daniels was even called to testify, other than asking her, like, did you receive money from the Trump organization or whatever, as opposed to letting her go through all of the salacious incidents of what she alleges happened. Because now again, are you taught? This case is not about paying off a porn star. It's a case about violating New York's misdemeanor in New York for improper business records.
Right. Understood. And I guess it's a little different than the uncharged crimes with Weinstein because, she kind of set things in motion and everything sort of descended from that. But understood. As I alluded to, you're the author of Filing and Winning Small Claims for Dummies. A lot of people watching who may never dream of being involved with the court system may find themselves in small claims court at some point. Give people some advice about what the best things to keep in mind if they ever find themselves in small claims court.
Okay. Most people's only contact with the court system will be in small claims court. And so generally, small claims court is designed that you don't need a lawyer, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't prepare, right? Preparation on every level of the court system wins cases, whether you have a lawyer or don't have a lawyer. So being prepared, trying to figure out what you actually have to prove before you get to the courthouse is important. Remaining calm is important. Telling your story is important. If you have difficulty telling a story, and maybe writing it out or bringing an advocate with you to assist you is important. Again, I always try to let people tell me that everything. Or in small claims, if I saw people were having difficulty, I would ask the questions. Okay, so the problem in where I was in civil court, which did only with money, is that in credit card cases, 95% of the people are unrepresented, and in general in civil court, I think it's about 70% of the people are unrepresented. The defendants, plaintiffs have lawyers, defendants don't have lawyers. So our legal system is designed for everybody to have a lawyer. And then as a judge, you're the referee. Okay, everybody knows the rules. Counselors just follow the rules, treat each other respectfully. We'll get your case in and go from there. if one side doesn't have a lawyer, I can't become the advocate for that person.
Right.
So I can't, I'm not their lawyer. On the other hand, I can't let, you and Arthur Idala come in and beat the person up on it, and so they leave there crying. So the dynamic changes as a judge. So in small claims court, sometimes the plaintiff, the claimant will have a lawyer. In New York, that's another ad. In New York, it's in small claims, it's a claimant and not a plaintiff, just to make things interesting. So I will, and you will have the lawyer objecting, knowing that the defendant unrepresented will get flustered and maybe not tell the story, not put in evidence. So I would then in those cases say, counselor, you're gonna have a standing objection to everything that's going in, but I'm going to let Frank testify. He's going to tell his story. If there's anything specific in there when he finishes that you want to raise another objection to, I'll let you raise it. Otherwise, the balance is thrown out. Now, so
it's a telemarketer. Right?
Well, my best friend is some guy named Spam Risk. He calls me several times a day.
But so for people that find themselves in small claims court, if you can have a lawyer, it sounds like it helps. If you have somebody that you trust that can help guide you through the process or give you some advice, right, that sounds like it's a good idea. But in any event, it sounds like the most important piece of advice are: one, don't get flustered, don't get nervous, don't get thrown off by opposing counsel objecting to everything. And make sure you are able to tell your story and get all the evidence in.
Right. So in New York, the New York City Civil Court, I know they have forms, they have booklets. They may actually have online instructions, and people will come in and I'll say, "Read the book." No. Did the clerk give it to you? Yeah, but I don't know what I did with it. Did you look at the online? No, I didn't do that. Okay. So here we go. You still, even though they didn't, as a judge, I can't say, well, then you're an idiot, get out of here. No, but you still have to guide them through the case. Most people in small claims court do not know how to put documents and photographs into evidence, but the rules in small claims court is called substantial justice. So that any rules of evidence don't really apply. They apply, but the judge has discretion to, be a little lenient in that you don't know how to make a foundation to get a photograph in. So you want me to see the photograph that the stop sign is missing, but you don't know how to do that. So I might have to walk you through the question. Who took this picture? When did you take it? Does it represent the condition at the time that you took it, the accident, whatever? So, on the other hand, if there's two lawyers, I tried not to interfere. Mm-hmm. I don't know the case. They know their case. They know how to put it on. So as long as they're following the rules and treating everybody respectfully, treating the witnesses respectfully, if there's a jury, being respectful to the jury and keeping the jury involved, then, I have a step back. It's when they start pushing the envelope and things like that I would intercede. But again, if someone makes an objection, you have to rule on it.
Right. Sure. All right. Let's talk about the structure of the New York State court system itself. We were talking about Harvey Weinstein and Donald Trump. You look at the criminal court structure. You have the Supreme Courts. You have county courts. You have district courts. You have New York City criminal courts. You have village courts, town courts, city courts. And depending on how those cases turn out, they will either end up in the appellate divisions of the Supreme Court, the appellate terms of the Supreme Court, first and second departments, or in the county courts, and then ultimately they can make their way all the way up to the New York State Court of Appeals. Right. Now that's just criminal. As far as civil court,
basically
you got the Court of Claims, you got family court, you got surrogates court, county courts. Yes, again, the Supreme Court. They do both civil and criminal. You got district court, New York City civil courts, city courts, town courts, village courts. I feel like I just got drunk just looking at all the different types of courts that there are in New York. Um, this seems incredibly convoluted to me, a layman. Uh, Break this down for us.
Okay. So,
How do the courts work? How do you decide which cases are heard where? Who goes where?
all right. So New York has the most inefficiently structured court system in the country, maybe even in the world. Definitely the most inefficiently structured. I used to say it has the most Byzantine structured court system in the country, but I got sued by the Byzantine Anti-Defamation League. So, I don't want to offend any more people from Byzantium anymore. That's the problem. I think there's at least 9 trial level courts. All right. Now, in the federal system and in most state systems, the highest court is the Supreme Court. Okay. In New York, the highest court is the Court of Appeals. I think we're one of 3 states that don't call the highest court the Supreme Court. Our court of general jurisdiction is the Supreme Court. And what does a court of general jurisdiction mean? It means if you're alleging the violation of a right, the Supreme Court is supposed to determine if there's a remedy that exists for you. Yeah. So, I used when I was teaching at St. John's for 40 years, when I'm doing this, I'd say, so you graduate from St. John's and you can't get a job. It can't be that you show up for your job interview with a purple mullet, a ripped T-shirt, tattoos, piercings all over your body at a white shoe firm or a white shoe accounting firm, and they don't hire you. It has to be St. John's didn't teach you properly. So you decide to sue St. John's for negligent education. So you file papers that say, I'm suing St. John's for negligent education. The clerk can't take a look at them and say, what are you, crazy? Get out of here, and throw them back at you. The clerk has to take them in and give them to a judge. A judge can say, you're crazy, or a judge can say, well, I noticed there's you do maybe there is a claim for negligent education. I'm going to let this case go forward. You were at a private university. I think maybe that's what you chose to go there. It's a private university. You're out of luck. You went to the CUNY. You went to the state system. Well, the state has guaranteed you that they're going to give you a decent education. Maybe if you're in the state system, we're going to hear the case. But a judge has to decide that. The Supreme Court, as a court of general jurisdiction, has to hear that case. Now, good. So, the Supreme Court is a constitutional court under the New York State Constitution, and for the purpose of what we're doing, because it's not exactly this, it was based on population. 1 judge for every 50,000 people in the district. Okay?
50,000, not 150,000.
1 for every 50. And it's supposed to be every 10 years, they're supposed to look at this. Unfortunately, the Constitution says that they may look at it. So it means the legislature doesn't have to look at it. So based on the 2020 census, there should be 404 judges in the Supreme Court to be elected through a process of not a primary process, through a delegate process. So if I wanted to run for Supreme Court and as a Republican or a Democrat, the party would nominate me, and then you would vote for delegates to a convention. It'd be a convention that you'd vote for delegates at, and the delegates would decide who's going to be nominated. If you wanted to also be considered, Frank, you would have to get your own slate of delegates to run, and people would vote for the delegates, and then at the convention, they'd be chosen. That's Supreme Court. It's the only court in the state that's done that way. So there should be 404 judges. Now I think they're finally up to 364. So they're already 40 short. Mm-hmm. When I was on the bench in 2017, and for the few years before that, there was only 328 about. So over the last couple of years, they've been adding more judges. At one time, there were more acting Supreme Court justices than elected Supreme Court justices. Well, what's an acting Supreme Court justice? Well, right now there are, I think there's over 700 judges in the state sitting in Supreme Court. Half of them are elected. The rest are acting Supreme Court justices. So that means they're appointed by the Office of Court Administration. Says we need more judges. Where are we going to get them from? So they pull them from, in the city, civil court, criminal court, to a lesser degree, family court, outside the city, from county court or district court, and then they make them acting Supreme Court justices. That means the civil court judge, when myself and Barbara Panapinto were made acting Supremes, or Kim Dollar was made an acting Supreme, the seat is empty. The seat is not empty. There's still 4 civil court judges. It just happens 3 of them are in Supreme Court.
Well, so just emphasize this for us, because this is where I think a lot of people get lost, including, and I've followed this for 25 years. I still get lost sometimes. You're elected, or someone's elected to the civil court.
Correct.
And then the Office of Court Administration will say, hey, we don't have enough Supreme Court justices elected. We're going to name you or a colleague of yours or both acting Supreme Court justices. So now you're an acting state Supreme Court justice.
Yep.
One, for the purposes of your role as a judge, not talking about retirement or serving past a certain age or anything like that. There's no distinction at all in what you can do. No differences at all in your responsibilities or powers, acting versus elected.
Right. And by the way, according to statute, it's a temporary assignment. I mean, they've got people who are temporarily assigned for 20 years.
Right.
And yeah, you are a full Supreme Court justice for enforcement of the law. There are other benefits, or not benefits, staffing things between an elected and an acting, but you're a full Supreme Court justice for that purpose.
So then what becomes of what was to be your role as a civil court judge? Are you still also a civil court judge hearing civil court cases, or are you?
I was. Barbara Panapinto wanted to do matrimonials. A lot of judges don't like to do matrimonials. She wanted to do them. So almost her entire career, except for the first few years, she was physically in Supreme Court, Richmond County. Never had no longer had any civil court cases. So what they would do then is they will bring someone over from Brooklyn or Manhattan to sit in Staten Island. And it goes the same all over the boroughs, whatever. Right. You're a $200,000 paperclip, basically. They put you where they need you. So,
and that's done at the discretion of OCA.
OCA, right, based on need. So now we said this. Right now, it's 364 elected, and there's over 700 that are sitting. That means half of the judges are acting. Now, in Manhattan, based on population, Manhattan should have 34 judges, right, elected. Right. Supreme. They actually have 38 elected. So I'm thinking that based on like the 1950 census, they had enough people for 38, and they never take them away. Even though the legislature in theory could reduce it, they never do. There are over 90 judges sitting in New York County Supreme Court.
So that includes elected and acting.
Elected and acting. So okay. Two-thirds of them, almost 2/3 of them are acting, because Manhattan has a calendar. The calendars in Manhattan are much heavier. Why is that? Okay. Every Article 78 proceeding, which means every lawsuit against the city of New York, gets cited where the agency is, so it goes into Manhattan, right? Where the main office of the agency is. I guess when the Board of Ed when it was the Board of Ed and they were in Brooklyn, they were bought in Brooklyn, but now they're in Manhattan too, the Department of Ed. So everybody wants to sue the city of New York for something, Manhattan gets filed. Okay. Matrimonials from all over the state are filed in Manhattan. Why? There's no requirement that a matrimonial be brought where the people reside. So if you have high profile people, they want the judges in Manhattan to hear it because they're used to dealing with lots of money. And if if you're getting a divorce, you don't want in the Staten Island Advance that Rachel never forgave you for getting the stain on your black shirt that you can't get out, right? It's a great story, and so you would say, well, let's go into Manhattan. Nobody will know what's all these cases. And third, the commercial division of New York County is designed to become the leading venue for commercial cases in the world. They compete like against London and Delaware. They want all the commercial cases brought there. So you will get cases where the contract says, it's a contract to deliver corn in Dubai, that if any lawsuits are going to be brought in Supreme Court in New York County, the parties have agreed to that. The court takes it. When I was sitting in Manhattan as a judicial hearing officer, which is something else, I'm going over the papers on a case. I'm saying, what do you guys do here? Said you were supposed to sue in Philadelphia. Said, Judge, no one's asking you to decide that. We brought it here. No one objected. But so you get all this flood of cases into Manhattan. So the problem is, though, now 2/3 of the judges are pulled from someplace else.
Right. Now, people, maybe it's not, some systems sound like they don't work well, and they actually might. So some expert, somebody at OCA may say, all right, it may seem strange that there's 9, 10, 11 different trial courts for civil and criminal cases in New York. But believe it or not, it actually does work pretty well. As someone that's been inside the system for a long time, do you think this what you described as a Byzantine structure of the New York State court system, I know it's convoluted, but does it work well?
No, it works. It would work. It would work better if they had proposed court merger every 10 years or so. A new chief judge comes in and tries to get court merger.
Judge DiFiore, former Chief Judge DiFiore, she proposed 2 years ago what she described as a long overdue overhaul of New York's trial court structure, and she described it as a plan that will consolidate New York's 11 trial courts into 3. Good idea? Bad idea?
Well, what do you think? I think in theory it's a good idea. I think she should have just had one trial of a court. What difference does it make if I'm trying a credit card case for $500 or for $50,000? It's a credit card case. The monetary amount doesn't matter. So most states would have that as their superior court or their district court, and that would be all the cases would be filed there, and you'd be assigned to the probate part. You'd be assigned to the criminal part. You'd be assigned to the consumer credit part. You'd be assigned to the small claims part. But everybody's in the same structure. And so you don't get this idea that, well, this is below me to handle a small claims case because I'm a Supreme Court judge. Now, like Judge Merchan, he started out, I think, originally as a family court judge. He was made an acting Supreme. He's actually a Court of Claims judge, but he's sitting in Supreme Court trying the Trump case as a acting Supreme Court justice. So the problem is, each of these courts, the judges are chosen in a different way. Mm-hmm. And like I said, the law is very slow to change, and no one's changed. There are interests who like what's the system that it's in place.
Well, talk to me about that. I'd like to get into how these judges are appointed or elected, but it seems like such a common sense thing, and I'm not giving necessarily Judge DiFiore any special credit because I've heard 100 other
judges. Judge Case started it too, trying to do it too.
I've heard every judge say they want to consolidate these 11 courts into 1, 2, or 3. If it's such a common sense thing, why hasn't it been done? What are the forces that are supporting the status quo?
Okay, so like we said, the Supreme Court judges, they're chosen by the parties through an elected process through a county convention. Civil court judges are elected through a primary process. And you get a party nomination, you get screened, but you can be primaried. So in Brooklyn and Manhattan, it's very common to have people primaried. In Staten Island and maybe Queens and the Bronx, it's not that common. But some of the very common. Once you win the Democratic primary in the city of New York, you're elected. You're basically elected. I should point out at one time when my first couple of years, I was the only judge elected in the city of New York without the Democratic line.
Wow.
120 civil court judges and like 180 Supreme Court judges at that time. Wow. I was the only one elected without the Democratic line. But everybody else, if you're a Democrat, basically you win.
Sure.
So Supreme Court, you have that system. Civil court, you have a political system primary. Criminal court, appointed by the mayor for a 10-year term. Family court, even more bizarre. If you're in the city of New York, you're appointed by the mayor for a 10-year term. You're outside the city of New York, you're elected for a 10-year term. I don't know if there's any court in the other court in the country that has two different ways of choosing the judges based on where they are. Okay, so I guess if you're elected, you're in the political process. That Court of Claims, appointed by the governor for a 9-year term with his advice and consent to the Senate. So, invariably, they used to say when a governor would change, all of a sudden there'd be a rush to make more Court of Claims judges because the people are in the system that want to stay in the system. So we say okay, what's the deal? Well, we'll create 9 more judges. The governor gets 3, the Senate gets 3, and the Assembly gets 3. Everybody's happy,
So the reason it sounds like there's resistance to a judicial reform proposal of consolidation is because everybody, the party bosses, the legislative leaders, the governor, they want to pick their guys, basically.
Yeah, of course.
It's as simple as that.
Simple as that.
Yeah. Well, so you alluded to something that I think most people don't realize, which is you were elected for civil court. The way civil court works in New York City, anyone that wants to run can simply circulate signatures. They can circulate signatures with multiple parties. And if they win the primary, they're nominated. If they win the general election, they're elected. That's how it works for every other elective office in New York State.
Correct.
Simple enough. The process of
civil court, there is no public funding, which probably the only elected office that should have public funding. You can't claim that you're in the pocket of whoever gave you the money, is the one that doesn't have public funding.
So you have direct election in the primary for civil court.
Right.
For Supreme Court, you alluded to this bizarre system of judicial conventions, which it's almost out of a comic book, I think. It's so convoluted, and it means the party bosses get to pick, and in 90% of the cases in New York City, that means it's the Democratic Party leaders that get to pick who the judges are. Then you have being appointed to the criminal court by the mayor. You have being appointed to the Court of Claims by the governor. All of these people can hear criminal cases in New York, which is incredible. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 different ways of getting to the bench, and all of these people can hear essentially the same cases. In your view, what's the right way to do it? How should judges be selected? Appointment, election, judicial convention, which some people say is a hybrid. I've heard pluses and minuses to all of those systems. Curious what you think.
Oh, okay. It seems in my years of trying to figure this stuff out, the states that have judges elected all want them appointed. The states that have judges appointed all want them elected. So, to paraphrase Winston Churchill, the worst way of picking judges is to elect them. Every other thing is worth. No, what's the way?
He would say democracy. It's the worst form of government except for all the other.
So the election of judges is the worst way of picking them except for everything else. In the elected process, the politics is open to a degree. You get to choose the person. In the appointed process, the politics is hidden. Right? People say, I'm an appointed judge with no politics. Really? There's no politics in the appointment. But if you how do you think you got to that point? I mean, it's actually now, I think the legislation after what happened with the recent appointments to the Court of Appeals, that some legislation to require that a disclosure of people who are filing amicus briefs or support for particular judges being considered for the Court of Appeals. My take is I liked running for office. I like going out and meeting people, but other people are turned off by that. But I still think, some states have an initial election and then you have a retention election, meaning that you don't have an opponent. People get to vote on whether you were good or bad, which maybe is a sort of a hybrid system also. There should be a screening, obviously. There should be some committee that says, I'm qualified to run, you're qualified to run, someone else is not qualified to run. And maybe if you get past the screening, then you get into the election process. But you're serving the public. I don't know why you shouldn't be elected.
Yeah, I mean, the argument that I've heard from some judges that didn't like the direct election of judges, meaning what we have for civil court or or surrogates court, is that you could have any millionaire that wants to be a judge spend a whole bunch of money in a Democratic primary, win the primary, and then boom, they're a judge without any sort of vetting of their qualifications or experience. The argument in favor of the judicial conventions, which I've never liked, in spite of having participated in a few, is that at least you have some vetting process before the voters get to weigh in. I can see the pluses and minuses of both systems.
Well, there's no system's perfect, but again, my take again, serving the public should have some say in who you are.
Absolutely, I agree. Look, I'm Mr. Democracy with a small d.
Yeah. So and you've been on screening panels. I mean, I've interviewed when you were involved with, and I can say every interview, no one ever asked me to hire anybody, to how am I going to rule on a case. They basically wanted to know, my philosophy on the law, how I was going to treat the public coming before me. I can't say that that's true in other boroughs, but on Staten Island, I'm pretty much, that's been, if you don't hire Frank to do your publicity, you're not getting the nomination. Never anything like that out here.
Yeah, well, so maybe that's why you never got to the state Supreme Court.
You never know. You have a cloud.
You were an elected civil court judge, and you became very famous not only in New York but around the country for a lot of your decisions. There were a lot of pop cultural references, a lot of references to historical things, even as the headline when you retired indicated, show tunes. Those are not the kind of things that you generally see in civil court judgments. You ran for civil court and was elected in a competitive race. You ran for civil court and was elected where you've been endorsed by both major parties. You ran for state Supreme Court in the first state Supreme Court judicial election since Staten Island was their own judicial district. I was with the Independence Party at the time. We supported you. Since you've retired, it seems like every year there's more and more Supreme Court seats created, and there's more and more of these deals made where nobody has to run. And we've seen a lot of people, nothing against any of them, go to the Supreme Court that really don't have the kind of experience that someone like you and other judges that never made it to be an elected Supreme have had. What gives? Who did you tick off at OCA or in the political process that made it so that as soon as you left, they created all these Supreme Court seats and you never got one?
Well, before 2008, Staten Island was part of Brooklyn, right? So all the Supreme Court seats, every Staten Islander that ran had to run in Brooklyn. So I used to say that back then, if Republicans nominated Cardozo, Brandeis, and Scalia, and the Democrats nominated Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, we would have the Disney Court. In 2008, we finally got our district. Now, if you can remember all the way back to when we started, I said Supreme Court is supposed to have one judge for every 50,000 residents. And the legislature, in all its wisdom, figured out they would only create 3 seats. So instead, it should have had 9. Should have had 9 in 2008, based on population. They only created 3 seats. Seemed to me that if someone wanted to go into federal court, you can't lose that case. Statute says you got to make 9. You didn't make 9, you made 3. You didn't even say we're doing 3 this year, and then 1 or 2 every year until we get up to 9. They didn't do that. They just did 3, and no one challenged it. I think it was an abuse of the process, and they should have had to do that. So I just said in 2008 we get the seats. The Democrats nominate Judy McMahon, and I said, well, Judy's a good judge. She's a very competent judge. She's a friend of mine. I said, we fought all these years to get our own district. We shouldn't do what they do in the other boroughs and have somebody run unopposed.
Mm-hmm.
So I ran. I said, again, it's an elected official, and, people should have a choice. I'm shocked that in just about now all the legislative races on Staten Island, you can't get people to run. Which I never thought I would see that, but that's another issue. That's another podcast for another day.
Yeah, don't get me started.
Yeah. So then, after I left, they finally put in legislation to add seats. Now, I was told that the problem before that was that they couldn't decide. Not only did Staten Island need seats, but Nassau-Suffolk was short 10 seats. If based on population, they should have had 10 more judges. And then, so what are you giving the judges to the Republicans for? Well, we got to find some place in the New York State to make some judges for the Democrats. So my understanding is they couldn't get it done. And then when I was about to retire, I believe Cuomo and the legislature were not getting along too well. So, things that should have been done maybe didn't get done. But as soon as I left, Staten Island got their full complement. But, some things I wasn't ready to retire, as you well know. And I thought I could that I could contribute. But, things work in strange ways. If I want to I'll give you my personal take on what happened. You never know what God's plan is for you, or the Almighty's plan, or whatever your belief is planned. So I was angry that I didn't have, couldn't get it, wasn't being a judge anymore because I liked it. I was
sure
best in the world. But then my wife got sick, right? So for a year and a half, I was home to take care of her. She would have told me to go to work.
Right.
She would have said, go to work every day. But I was here to take her to the doctor for the year and a half that she was sick. So that was the plan. That was why, or that's how I rationalized.
Well, that's wonderful. I think that's great. I think there's something to that. No doubt about it. Now, let's talk a little bit about how these judges are selected and assigned in various places. My friend Brendan Lantry, he was elected as a Supreme Court judge.
I taught him everything he knows. He was my student at St. John's. He missed half the classes, but that's something else.
A lot of people would say that's nothing to brag about. But he was elected in Staten Island.
Correct.
He's currently hearing criminal cases in Manhattan.
Right.
Bob Helbach, elected to the civil court in Staten Island, and then ultimately is a criminal court judge when he's first elected somewhere else. Now, a lot of folks, this whole system goes against the grain of what seems fair and just. For instance, let's say there's an election for civil court. I look at the candidates as a voter, and I may decide, all right, this person is well suited for the civil court because that's where their experience is. That's that's the job they've asked for. That's the job they've prepared for. They don't have any experience trying criminal cases. I wouldn't want them hearing criminal cases. I want them hearing civil court cases. Now, who is OCA, the Office of Court Administration, to substitute their judgment for my judgment as a voter and say, oh, sorry, Staten Islander Frank Morano, even though you've decided that this person should be a civil court judge, we're plucking him out of the civil court, putting him into here criminal court cases. And by the way, not even in Staten Island, the place that they were elected, in Manhattan, a community, by the way, that has very different values and would never elect someone like that.
Right.
How is that fair to the people in either community? And how is that constitutional? How does OCA get away with that?
Well, they get away with it because nobody challenges it. If you're a young judge, you're not going to go and fall on your sword because everybody's thinking about their future. So, the next thing, because they can temporarily assign you someplace, whatever that means. So I don't think, I think legally they can't do that other than on an emergency, but they don't really assign you. They ask basically, would you do us a favor and go to Manhattan for a year? And most people don't say no. I mean, if Dominic is going to call and take 6 months off to write the great American novel in the iambic tetrameter, and John calls you up and says, we want you to come in an hour earlier and cover Dominic's show for the next 6 months, what are you going to tell him? Say, I got a contract, I'm not doing it? Right. I mean, right? Basically,
yeah, I'm filling in Friday for Dominic, by the way.
And I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? If you're a young judge, you got a big future ahead of you. You probably don't want to challenge the system. But it gets back to the point that the Supreme Court is so screwed up that they have to pull two judges from Staten Island and put them into Manhattan. Now, Staten Island should have 9 judges, let's say, right? There are 14 sitting here. So it's not just a Manhattan problem. Every borough in the city does not have enough judges to fill Supreme Court. So Mike Pinto got elected to my seat now this year, and he's in Brooklyn, I think, in criminal, or Manhattan in criminal, whatever.
But you said no one ever challenges it. I understand why the judges don't want to challenge it, because they don't want to incur the wrath of OCA.
Right.
But has that been litigated? Has a voter ever tried to challenge?
I don't think so. Why don't you get one of your reform groups to do this?
Yeah, maybe I will. Maybe I will. With all the free time that I have, I may do that. I mentioned Chief Judge Janet DeFiore. Obviously, it was quite a pseudo scandal at the time. She resigned as the chief judge. She was one of the more conservative judges on the Court of Appeals. She had been a Republican. Then she became a Democrat. She was an elected DA. A lot of the progressives groups didn't like her. But what exactly happened here? I know there was a beef with the head of Dennis Quirk, the head of the Court Officers Union, and maybe she did some things that she shouldn't have done. What happened in terms of Janet DeFiore's downfall?
Well, I think that's and I have no personal knowledge of anything that went on, and I don't even have I was already out of the system, so I didn't even get all the good gossip. Sure. I think based on what they found, she was, it was a good case to say that she was not, she was maybe abusing some of her authority and do it. I think she called it. I think the biggest problem was, didn't she call up the judge to try to influence, say, that and that's like a no.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like that probably was the right decision, that that she had to step down.
Yeah. This is a public trust. I mean, and I always crack up. The court. They're always sometimes more concerned about the appearance of impropriety than actual impropriety. So I would always say. So I go to a Yankee game with you, even though you're a Met fan. Would work on that. But and you buy me a hot dog, and some litigant sees me that you bought me a hot dog, and you're another lawyer. The next thing I got to answer a complaint. Stranier's throwing Morano's case because he bought him a hot dog.
Right.
I said, maybe you would throw a case for a hot dog. I ain't throwing a case for a hot dog, and I don't think Frank expects me to throw his case for a hot dog. But they get all bent out of shape by the appearance of impropriety.
Very true. There was a lot of drama last year with the replacement for
right.
Chief Judge DeFiore. Governor Hochul had nominated Hector LaSalle, a guy that had a very stellar reputation as a judge. Ultimately, he was torpedoed by the state Senate, the more progressive elements of the state Senate, and they replaced him with Rowan Wilson.
Right.
What was your take on that whole thing, and what's your take on the manner in which
I,
court of appeals judges are selected.
I think you hit on it before that people don't understand the whole system. They went after LaSalle based on some decisions that he wrote as an appellate division judge. Well, my understanding of the appellate division is that they try to get consensus on every case. And so then you get assigned to write the decision. So if he's authoring a decision, it's not his decision, it's the decision of the panel. Now, on the other hand, if it's a 4-1 vote at the appellate division, he's the one, and he says, this is the most ridiculous thing I ever heard of. There shouldn't be any right to A, B, and C in this state. It's ridiculous. Then he can hang it on him. That's his opinion, right? But I think what they did is they got a bunch of university professors to claim that what he did was, did all this stuff, and then they said, well, they obviously didn't read any of the decisions because, like I said, they weren't his decisions, and what they were claiming was in the decision was not the decision. The decisions tended to be on narrow points of procedural things, and they blew it into something that it wasn't. Now, you have to also remember, when I was a young boy back in seminary school with Jim Morrison, 80% of the state legislature and the city council were lawyers. Now I think it's less than 20%.
Huh. So
they have no clue on how the system works. They have no experience. They don't understand. I don't want to be that pejorative, but you understand what I'm saying. They don't have the same experience of dealing with the court system that a lawyer has. They don't have the same experience of dealing with judges that lawyers have. What is the function of people?
I mean, you could see it in any profession, like, a big media conglomerate or corporate conglomerate takes over a radio station, and they put in charge of the radio station someone that has no experience in radio. Right. I get it. You have the people that are making the decisions about who's in charge of the courts that have never practiced or really had any experience in the courts. I get it.
And so then you can, we're trying to get this legislation in to get rid of the cap for 50,000 and have it based on a metric of need. You should put the judges in the place courts that need it. And I said, well, I think, I don't want to be sound demeaning, but you got to reduce this to these people are not lawyers. They don't understand the court system. This has to be reduced to simple terms that people, you have to do an instruction, like, PowerPoint on this is how it works. Because I mean, and with that thing, there were people coming up and saying, well, if you get rid of the cap, it's a violation of one man, one vote. These are judges saying this.
Right.
Well, one man, one vote doesn't apply to judicial elections. I don't think it's anywhere in the country it's ever been applied. It's a legislative election. So you're in. These are judges who are putting into this mix a false premise that there's such one man, one vote applies to judicial election. It doesn't.
One of the things that got a lot of attention during Weinstein, but it's been talked about increasingly, I guess, for the last year or so, is this trend among the Court of Appeals judges to vouch in certain judges. A judge recuses themselves and they get vouched in by another judge. I'm not even sure that I completely understand this. I'm wondering if you can explain what has changed, because I hear a lot of people very upset about it, and I don't necessarily understand what was the old system versus what they're doing now is.
Well, there's 7 judges on the Court of Appeals, and they were nominated by the governor, and then the advice. There's a screening committee that puts up to 3 names, I think, and that goes to the governor. The governor chooses one. I'd like this person to be on the Court of Appeals. Then the legislature has to approve it. Okay, so now that you're on the Court of Appeals, a case comes up, and you have to recuse yourself. So let's say Judge Catataro, who's on the Court of Appeals, that case comes up, and he actually heard the case when it was in Supreme Court in New York County. So now he has to recuse himself. So they always want to try to have 6 people deciding on the case. So they then would vouch in somebody. I mean, if it's something that it's obvious that there's going to be a 6-0 vote, maybe they don't vouch someone in. But if they think it's an issue that's going to be a split court on, then they want to vouch somebody in because of 3-3. The tie doesn't go to the runner in law. So they'll vouch in a judge. So I'm not sure what the procedure, if there even was a procedure, other than they call up and say, Joe Maltese, you doing anything Monday? Come up here and hear this case. And he's vouched as an appellate division judge into the Court of Appeals. I think now that things have gotten more politicized in this, because I don't remember anybody even complaining about this in the past, but now with the whole attitude, politicalization of the court system, now we look at every move. So why are you putting Maltese in? He's a Republican, conservative Republican from the state of Staten Island. What's he know about farming in Onondaga County? So I think they want to put in a system that is going to be, maybe you'll be like on a wheel or a blackball box, and they'll pull a name that they'll qualify certain people to sit, and they'll just pull them randomly to sit, which maybe is a fairer system.
So, as of now, the once the judge makes the decision to recuse themselves, it's the chief judge that gets to vouch in.
I think the chief judge selects who they can put in. Yeah,
gotcha.
So I don't know if they want to change that. Yeah. By the way, to recuse yourself, that is solely a decision of the judge, unless it's a statutory recusal. So,
I've kept you for an hour already, but there's a couple of quick items that I want to run through with you really quickly and have you, have you comment on.
I get overtime, right?
Yeah, exactly. You get half of everything that I'm going to make for the overtime.
Right.
There's this new criminal justice group that is pushing for more scrutiny of judges. Now, I think more scrutiny of judges is a good thing because people don't know anything about the judges that they're paying for and that they're appearing before. But this group, which led the fight against Hector LaSalle, Governor Hochul's nominee to lead the state's top court, is essentially arguing that judges are routinely reappointed to the bench without sufficient evaluation. Now, I agree with that premise. What I don't agree with is their agenda, which is basically that anybody that puts anybody in prison is completely unworthy of reappointment. So you have this group. It's called The Court New York Deserves. And they're saying right now, New York judges are not meaningfully evaluated even after years on the bench. And most judges are automatically reappointed or renominated for additional terms. And they point out as public servants, judges should serve the public. And as government officials with set terms, not life appointments, they should have to earn additional time on the bench. Now, I agree with all that. They say, though, that earning additional time on the bench would essentially mean not putting people in prison. This is creating quite a sea change in the New York court system. Give me your take on this whole thing.
Well, every idea is not a good idea. You just don't get reappointed. You got to go through a whole application process. You go through a screening panel. All judges are invited to participate screening by the city bar. And there's been, over the last, I guess, 20 years now, almost all the bar screening groups use the same form now. Previously, every time you went to go get screened by a committee, you had a different form. It's like a uniform form now. And I was amazed the first time I was up for a re-election. The city bar guy came in. 3 guys came into my chambers. One of them had read every case that I had written.
Wow.
And he was questioning me on why I did this, that, and the other thing. So the people on these screening panels take it seriously. And, just because you don't like a decision doesn't mean it's bad. Unfortunately, that's where we are in our system. It's all or nothing. When I first started in politics and public office, my brother was an assemblyman for 24 years, and I worked on John Markey's there. I could, we'd have differences of opinion with Democrats, right? But we'd all fight if we wanted to go work for Project Hospitality or, or the Red Cross or for the College of Staten Island. We'd get together and work for them. Right. Now, you're a Democrat and Republican. I'm not talking to you. You're a bad guy. And that's very dangerous. Most judges I know are very committed. They're serious about their work. They make mistakes. Yes, they're human beings. But, just because, say, there'd be advocate groups come in, the clerk misplaced the papers on someone's file. It wasn't because the clerk misplaced the papers, because it was a grand conspiracy by the court system, OCA, and and people wearing aluminum hats to deprive their clients of their rights. No, it was someone made a mistake. They're human, and again, there are judges who at certain ages maybe should be reevaluated because people have health issues and things like that. But every judge I met was serious about their work. And, I might not agree on what they did.
Sure,
but
understood.
Yeah,
understood. One of the first victims of this new judicial scrutiny has been Vincent Del Giudice. Yeah, who's a court of claims judge, but he, like a lot of court of claims judges, an acting supreme, I think was, and I believe still is, a registered conservative. You see this headline in the Daily News, this Brooklyn judge needs to hang up his robe. And some of the other people pointing out his record will point out that some of the prison sentences he gave criminal defendants were overturned by the appellate division. Say he would sentence someone to 50 years to life, 75 years to life. Maybe the appellate division would give them 50 to life. And it was made clear to him that he was not going to get a reappointment past the age of 70. So he's retiring.
Right.
What's your take? Is this somebody that, in your view, should be able to continue to serve on the bench? Or do the people that have pointed out how often he's been overturned by the appellate division have a point that maybe he shouldn't be?
Well, but also you don't want to tell him how to decide the case.
Right.
He has to have some sort of discretion. I mean, they also saw a negative story about Matt Sciarrino.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about that too.
Yeah, I know Matt. For when he started as Joel Mortice's court attorney, very serious, scholarly person, and you don't like his ways to say, well, that's too bad. There's other judges I don't like it. Someone else doesn't like their decision.
So did you feel that the criticism of Sciarrino, and that got that New York Post headline there, New York City judge retiring to Florida days after setting free deranged brute who broke mom of three's jaw, and sometimes that's just the New York Post. Did you feel like, and Bob Holden, who's a friend of mine, a councilman, he was very critical of Judge Sciarrino there, as others have been. Do you feel like he kind of got a raw deal in terms of the media coverage of those cases?
Yeah, I think so. I think he also, I think he ended up with the Occupy Wall Street cases at some point. He never was one of these guys saying, "Oh, this is too controversial. I'm not doing it." Go give it to the guy down the hall. Again, first of all, you're never right 100% of the time, but you're never wrong 100% of the time. And you're human beings, and you base the decision on what facts that are presented to you. Sometimes things are come up. I remember when I first became a judge, I go in and Tom Aliata was my supervisor, and I go in, and Tom's a very calm guy. He's like steam's coming out of his ears. And I said, "What's the matter?" He says, "Read this decision from the appellate term." I read it over. I said, "Were you not at this trial?" He says, "No, I don't know where they found all this stuff, but that's not what was before me." So if you got smart lawyers and you lose a case, sometimes they can figure out how to represent the case on appeal.
Interesting.
Appellate courts can make new findings of fact.
Interesting. You alluded to how you weren't ready to retire. You didn't want to retire. It's interesting. The four leading candidates for president right now, well, five even, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Jill Stein, and I believe Cornel West as well. Not one of them would be able to be a judge in New York State because they're too old to be elected. They're
Correct.
all 70 years old or older. And yet, they're going to be, one of them will be president and appoint the Supreme Court, all the members of the federal judiciary.
Well,
I know you have some strong feelings about judicial retirement age. Talk to me about that.
well, so first of all, the age in New York is 70 for everybody except the Supreme Court. If you're on Supreme Court, you can apply to be what we could say is certificated, and you can stay for up to three 2-year terms. So you can stay to age 76. The certification process is an application, and then you go through a complete physical. I just applied to get reappointed as a judicial hearing officer and went through a complete physical, best physical, better than my doctors give me. I was there for hours. They did EKG, they did a mental acuity test, they did hearing, eyes, all this other stuff, and OCA pays for this to screen out. My own take is maybe they should start doing these at everybody at age 65 because there are a lot of my colleagues who are workaholics and don't go to doctors. And maybe if they went and had a physical every year at the expense of OCA, they'd find out that they got some issue that they should be dealing, health issue that should be dealt with. That's another side. So there is a screening process, and if you don't have the mental acuity or the physical ability to do it, you can't be certificated. But the 70 is now too young. Federal system, it's for life. Actually, it's a federal constitution says on good behavior. It doesn't say for life. And when New York started with age 70, that was pretty much considered a lifetime appointment, because if you live to age 70, you're already, that was like your, a career at the end of your career. People didn't live beyond that. Yeah. Now that's not true. People are very active into their 80s and even into their 90s.
That's certainly the case. We also, lost a couple of your colleagues, two people, that I was very friendly with. Recently, Judge Minardo passed away, and Judge Gigante. I know you go back a long time with both of them. Give me your take on both Judge Gigante and Judge Minardo as judges and as people.
Again, they were public servants. They were committed to the public, and they were both excellent judges, excellent community people, excellent family people, and they each had their own style. Bob very low key. Phil was a little more animated. Yeah, right. But that's what makes being judge. We're not cookie cutter, and it's not a cookie cutter. Everybody is a little, has their own background and training, but they're both known for treating people fairly and trying to make sure that the public interest is taken care of and that they're doing their job.
Lastly, and then I really will let you go. There was, New York, like most other states, offers non lawyers the opportunity to be a judge. You can be a town justice in New York State, and you don't have to be a lawyer. And there are a lot of states where this is the case. The Atlantic has this article from a couple of years ago, when your judge isn't a lawyer, and it's pretty critical. And it writes, in some states, justices of the peace don't need a law degree to put defendants behind bars. And it gets into how Montana and 7 other states, including New York, South Carolina, Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, and Wyoming, allow non-lawyer judges to hand down jail sentences for misdemeanors without the right to a new trial before a judge. Now, interestingly enough, in New York City, this does not happen. You can't be a non-lawyer judge in New York City, but you can in other parts of the state. I'm not a lawyer. I'd love to throw some people in jail. What's your take on the idea of non-lawyer judges? There's calls to do away with this in New York State and other places where it exists, and I'm sure there are calls in New York City to allow this to help alleviate some of the judicial shortages that you've alluded to.
Well, the statistics show that the non-lawyer judges tend to make more mistakes and get appealed and get jammed up on like violating people's rights, because they'll just throw people in jail and they don't know about due process and stuff. So the solution is better training. I am on the faculty of the National Judicial College in Reno, and we do training. I do an evidence class for non-lawyer judges, although a lot of lawyer judges take it because evidence is something you always need to keep going over. And small claims, again, and because in these courts, especially on the tribal courts, you can have non-lawyer judges, but it's a matter of training. I'm sure there's good judges and bad judges there. It would be better if everybody was a lawyer, because lawyers are trained. You say lawyers are trained. They can go to battle for a week, screaming at each other in court, and then say, "Okay, where are we going this weekend with our wives?"
Yeah.
Everybody's okay with it. You get free take on stuff.
It sounds like you're okay with the town justices if there's better training.
Better training, yeah. All right. I mean, if I could probably cut your hair if I learned how to do it, right?
Exactly.
And it looks a little better too. So
let me see if anybody has questions that we should address. All right, Michael Cutler asked the question: was that the Jim Morrison that you went to seminary school with?
Yes, and where I learned you cannot petition the Lord with prayer.
Yeah. Jim Fulton writes, throw out brags. This is something that came up a lot during the gubernatorial race about, I think all the Republicans running for governor claimed that they were going to remove Alvin Bragg. I thought it was a little absurd, to suggest that. I thought it was political grandstanding. What do you think?
I beat him in an election. Exactly. No one votes.
Right, he's up for re-election next year.
I checked out, Bill de Blasio, secretary. I got a mandate. You got a mandate. 18%, only 18% of eligible voters voted for you, and you got 2/3. 12. You were elected by 12% of the population. That's not a mandate in my book. So run quality candidates against them. It takes money,
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. Judge, I'm going to let you go. You've been very generous with your time. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Okay. Anytime, Frank. And again, if people send in stuff over that you need answered, you know how to get a hold of me.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Judge Straniere. Yeah, for those of you that are watching this or later on, or are listening to it in podcast form, you can email me. My email's at the bottom of the screen there, frank.morano@redappleaudionetworks.com. I'll get your question to Judge Straniere if it's a legal issue, or if it's just a comment about this discussion and this interview. You can absolutely, pose that email to me. I know this is a little bit more in the weeds than the kind of discussion that we will normally have here, but honestly, I think it's an important discussion to have because, as I stated at the start, I feel like a lot of people don't know anything about the New York State court system. And yet, if you're charged with a crime, if you're going through a divorce, God forbid, if your contractor rips you off, you're going to find yourself in the court system. And I think you should at least have an understanding of what court you're in, how the judge that's hearing your case got there, and kind of the ins and outs of this. And look, even if you don't find yourself in the court system, we're paying for all this, right? So we should at least have an interest in what's going on. Those of you that are watching this live, please be so good as to share this, because if you share this either on Twitter, you can retweet it, or if you're on Facebook, just hit the share button. That'll help more people go and explore this. If you want to get the perfect Father's Day gift, we are rapidly approaching Father's Day. Go to the WABC radio store And if you go to personalities and click on Frank Morano, you can see the phenomenal merchandise that is available in the WABC radio store. Just go to wabcradiostore.com and you can see they're making available the Frank Morano bundle. So if you go ahead and check out the Frank Morano bundle or any of the great merchandise that we have there is a lot of cool stuff. So that's all at wabcradiostore.com, and it is certainly the perfect gift for any father. Michael Cutler writes, "Thanks, Frank. That was a great interview." Well, no thanks to me. It was thanks to Judge Straniere and his substantial knowledge. I'm glad you watched it. Like I said, I know that some aspects of this are a little into the weeds. And if you feel like you had a tough time following this, you can watch it again, because I know sometimes, we talk about the judicial conventions, civil court, court of claims, criminal court, acting supreme, and it gets a little difficult to follow. It's not just you, right? Because as I mentioned, there are a lot of people in media who comment on the courts that don't understand this. There's a lot of people in the political process that don't understand this. You go to one of these judicial conventions. Now, keep that in mind. Go to one of these judicial conventions, and these are the people that are actually deciding who's going to be on the state Supreme Court. They don't understand what the judicial conventions are. And I'm not exaggerating. This is absolutely the case. And, I've been a delegate. I've chaired judicial conventions for three different political parties. And I can tell you the people that are deciding who the nominees of these parties are, they don't understand it. So, those of you that are watching, please be so good as to share, like, comment. That'll help the virality of this. If you want to join the Facebook group and comment on any of the issues that we have raised on the show, you can absolutely do so at facebook.com/groups/Radio Morano. And if you are watching this on Facebook, you can become a Facebook subscriber for the very reasonable price of only 99 cents a month. Go to facebook.com/become supporter/Morano fan, or if you want to, a shortcut that Brandon brought to our attention, while you're watching this, go click the overview button under the comments box, then scroll to the bottom and click the subscribe button. But however you choose to become a subscriber, become a subscriber, and that helps us out, and it supports a lot of the stuff that we're doing, whether you call it journalism, commentary, entertainment. It allows us to keep Carmine in Oreos and chocolate milk. So, I appreciate that. All right. Please share this. Please send this to a friend. I think it was a great discussion. My thanks to Judge Straniere. My thanks to all of you who watched this, especially on Twitter. We had a lot of people, and still have a lot of people watching live on Twitter. I'm not sure why that's the case, why so many people tuned in live on Twitter, but it certainly was. Those of you that are watching on Facebook, you can feel free to send stars and support what we're doing here. Thank you to everybody that watched this. Ellen, Michael, everybody that's commenting, Stacy, Jim, Rob, everybody that tuned in. I've got an action-packed show for radio tonight. We're going to get into, Brian Kilmeade is going to join us to talk about the news of the day. Actually, I know it's technically tomorrow. Comedian Fred Rubino is going to join us. He's quickly becoming a fan favorite. And Neil Pollack, who was a Jeopardy champion, who wrote about his addiction, it's his words, not mine, to marijuana. And a lot of people think you can't get addicted to cannabis. He says that you can, and it really affected him. He's also kind of a film critic now. So we're going to talk about Jeopardy, pot, and movies when he comes on. And I have some fun stories that I think you're going to enjoy. As soon as my son Carmine wakes up, we're going to take him to the indoor playground, and there's no telling what could happen there in terms of stories and, excuse me, whatever else. I'm going to go take a lozenge, get rid of this frog in my throat. I don't want anybody to think that I'm doing a Robert F. Kennedy Jr. impersonation. By the way, we're in the home stretch of signatures for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So if anybody wants to sign the petition, you live in New York, you can text me and I will make arrangements to get your signature. You can text me at 8168-MORANO. That's 8168 MORANO. And you can certainly find us on YouTube at Morano Vision, MORANO Vision. All right. Until the next time we do this again, I'll see you on the radio.